Welcome back to Coffee with Yvonne, a show for creatives and entrepreneurs. I'm Yvonne Pearson, your host, and Darling, the founder of Pink Doll House Marketing. And this week, we're going to do a marketing magic episode, but I'm going to switch it up just a little bit because it's Thanksgiving this week. And I decided I'm going to give you an early holiday gift and tell you 5 things that I have learned about being a podcaster so far in my podcasting journey. Full backstory, I started podcasting back in 2020 during a Panda Express, in which when the whole world was shut down, I was like the many who were inspired to turn on their camera, even though my setup was like very limited. It was just me, my iPhone, some plug-in headphones, and a dream. And started Coffee with Yvonne. And over the years, Coffee with Yvonne has seen many iterations of the show. I started out in which I did like a Netflix style drop in which I recorded all the episodes and dropped them all at once, and then wouldn't come back for another like 6 plus 8 months for the show. Then I retooled it again and brought it in more like an interview format with in-person interviews. I didn't like that because I like having all those people up in my house. Then I thought again and retooled it because, again, I was new into the podcasting world and didn't have really a lot of background in producing my own show. I did have background, however, of being a co-host on a show. I was part of a show early on in my podcasting journey, but no longer am part of that show due to, different reasons. So when I was trying to figure out exactly what kind of format I wanted Coffee with Yvonne to be, it had to go through many iterations to find the formula that worked best. And even now for the show, I'm still learning, still retooling, still studying, still listening to my feedback from my audience, to my own personal criticisms of myself, because I do struggle with perfectionism. Full transparency, but it's a way for me to learn and become the best version of myself as a creative through the lens of others and through my own personal perspectives. So now, as we fast forward to the version that you get now with Coffee with Yvonne, which is a mix of interviews in marketing magic and also shorter episodes that are not long form like they were before, which while I was doing an hour plus 20 plus minute episodes for what? For what, Yvonne? No, not for your show. But as I've learned as a podcaster, I've also learned what works best for me. So today on the show, we're going to do, again, like I mentioned, marketing magic, just a little bit different, and talk about 5 lessons I've learned as a podcaster. So grab your coffee or whatever you're drinking because it's the holiday season. And I know we got to deal with our relatives. And let's chat. Okay, so for our first lesson, and if you see me looking down at my screen, it's because I bring notes to the conversation. Let me put my coffee down. Coffee. That's so Wendy of me, isn't it? Gosh, I miss Wendy. I miss Wendy in that purple chair. Can we talk for a second? I don't have cable anymore or a paid streaming service because the way that bill was set up, who is paying $80+ a month for limited? Let it go, Yvonne. But I have really leaned into the live TV services that are offered through my subscription-based things like Prime. I also watch live TV on Pluto TV, which is free all the time. And on Prime, there's a Wendy Williams channel. And I have noticed since I've started watching these reruns of her show, there's a lot of similarity in the way that I present myself on the podcast to Miss Wendy Williams. Of course, it's not a purple chair, but things like her signature mug that Wendy used to do, her purple mug, I noticed with my pink mug, and the way that she engages with her guests or keeps the conversation going, even with just her talking about hot topics. I just want to throw that little sprinkle tidbit out there. And of course, with my podcasting style, there are other influences as well. Like with The Read, one of my favorite podcasts, Ratchet and Respectable by Demetria L. Lucas. Even people like Amanda Seales. I used to listen to her podcast all the time. But there's always deep influences that you see in your style when you look at other people who you have admired or you admire their work ethic within the space similar to yours. So let's first get into that first lesson. Creating isn't easy. Publishing consistently is the real discipline. The hardest part is not recording. It's showing up every week. And when I tell you, it is hard to show up every single week. There are days where I only have time to record the podcast at night, like right now. Right now, it is 8:42 in the evening on a Monday night, which means I had worked a full day. I'm also a new dog mom, so I had to make sure that my dog was comfortable, fed in his play area where he's safe and comfortable so I could have an hour to record the show. I had to make sure things are set up to make sure I show up in this space. And even things that are not related to my personal day-to-day life, but just making sure that you're in an emotional headspace to record. Being able to translate your personality through the screen is not easy. It's not easy just to look at a little green dot or whatever dot you're looking at, or you have like a fancy setup in a studio, and bring your personality out every week to engage with an audience you may never see or you may never meet. Also, when it comes to like showing up every week, show up prepared. Showing up prepared is also half the battle. Like I said, I bring notes to the conversation. I just don't turn on the mic, which some people do. That's their thing. But I don't just turn on the mic because I understand the platform that I have for my podcast is not centered around things like pop culture or things like that, which you can do background information on depending on what you're talking about. But mine is about marketing and creativity, which means I have to do research. I have to look up articles. I have to dig into the story itself to find those pieces and tidbits to talk about with my audience. When I'm doing an interview, I'm not just going off based on social media when I do my interview. I'm doing research on their content, their work, looking at their website, their bio, things they've been featured in to make sure the questions that are curated around the conversation are engaging and also match the needs for my target audience, which is centered around marketing and creativity. Then when we go a bit deeper into that editorial calendar, I also believe in posting reminders. Now, I'm one of those people, I live and die by my calendar. If it's not in my calendar, guess what? I'm going to forget. And it's no shade to those of you who can live without your calendar, remember every single detail, the things you have to do. I can't. And even with this podcast, I have to put a reminder for myself each and every week to record the show. I usually set that reminder about 2 days in advance to, prepare like the run of show, to do things like, okay, make sure you record around this time because this is what your day looks like, or to restructure the day that I record because I normally record on Sundays after Pilates, to record the show during this time window so I could work on other things like schoolwork. And yes, I am also in grad school as well. I know I carry a load. Please don't talk to me about it. My friends and family have already talked to me. I know. But grad school is also being paid for by my employer. So who gonna turn down a free degree? No one. Understanding that balance means that how I show up each and every week has to be mindful. It has to be strategic and it has to be well thought out and well planned. When it comes to that editorial calendar, when you're thinking about things planning out, don't just plan out the recording for your show, plan out the content, right? I also plan out things like when I edit, I plan out things like when I upload, and I plan out things like when I promote. And I don't do that in one day because when I try to do it in one day, it became so overwhelming. And it's easy to get overwhelmed when you have a show like my format, which is weekly. Planning, you're recording, you're editing, you're uploading, you're promoting. That is a lot to put on one person, especially if you're an indie podcaster that does not have a team behind you. And you can have a team, but just know the team gonna come with some money and some costs. And if you want to keep your costs low, a lot of times the work will have to fall on you to get it done. So for Coffee with Yvonne, in terms of that consistency, my show goes up every Thursday at 3 p.m. without fail. It is very, very rare. The show does not go up exactly at 3 p.m. I may miss that mark by maybe like 3:10 or 3:30 at the latest, but it's consistently going up every Thursday at 3. What I've learned also about showing up too is that consistency is important. Before, when I was retooling and figuring out the format for my show that worked, I wasn't being consistent about what day my show would drop. I would say, oh, if it drops on Tuesday, that's cool. If it drops on Thursday, that's cool. If it drops at 5 o'clock, that's cool. But my audience is like, girl, where is the consistency? If you say you're going to drop the show. How can we build an audience with you if you're not dropping the show correctly and on time? Where's the professionalism? And I had to check myself. I had to think to myself, would I bring the same energy in my day-to-day role? And if not, why am I doing it here in a space where I am showing up as my creative self, unfiltered, uninhibited in this space? Why am I not giving that same energy I give to my 9 to 5? Once I changed my mindset and started using the same structural planning I use for my 9 to 5 in my podcast, things shifted. Things shifted for me. When I started showing up every single week consistently and holding myself accountable for those things, the tone shifted, the show shifted, and the show elevated and grew. So for that marketing takeaway, consistency builds skills, it builds brand trust, and it keeps your audience engaged. More importantly, take care of your audience. If you are someone who wants to really grow this into, something that you can do as a full-time role, because people have done that. They have transitioned their podcast from being a hobby to being something that they could do as their full-time job. Me, on the other hand, that's not my personal goal for this. My goal for Coffee with Yvonne is to leverage me as a thought leader in the marketing space and to use this to elevate my presence into like speaking engagements, panels, and things like that. This is a running portfolio for me. So there's a goal for me in this as well. But for those who are looking to go into podcasting full time, just make sure you're consistent. Make sure you're consistent. Make sure you show up for your audience and keep yourself organized in that consistency. So for that second lesson, your podcast is a content machine. Create workflows and AI to simplify processes. Now, we touched a bit on that in lesson number 1. We're going to dive a little bit deeper in lesson number 2. For Coffee with Yvonne, I'm not going to cap you. I use tools to keep myself sane. I surely do. Shout out to AI. You could feel the way you want to feel about AI, but AI has helped me tremendously with streamlining processes. So before we dive into that, the first thing I use is Google Workspace. Please invest in a system like Google Workspace. It helps me with building out my template for Coffee with Yvonne for the run of show. It also helps me when it comes to things like, holding documents, holding things like recordings or clips or audio, and just has like a backup system for keeping everything in place. It also helps me with Google Workspace. I send out my emails through my Gmail for Google. That in turn has allowed for me, I have a whole folder in my drafts of just templates, right? Templates for emails, for sending out for different things, whether it's reaching out to a guest, whether it's following up with things like the invite and recording instructions, the run of show, and even down to things like approving the social media graphics before they go live for promotion and letting them know that their episode has gone live across the different platforms. There is a template for everything. My Google Workspace is the way that I organize those things in my practices and workflows. Another thing I use, my girl Canva. My girl Canva come through for me every single time. I have been a Canva baddie since the beginning. And I mean since the beginning. Before you could erase backgrounds, before you could do, fancy things like video and all that stuff. I was in it from the trenches when Canva first started and everybody was saying, oh, Canva is going to be one of those things that, dilutes the idea of a designer. No, it didn't. It made it a lot easier for people who, like myself, who are not designers, who want to create beautiful graphics using templates or allow for themselves to build out their own templates like what I did for Coffee with Yvonne to create a brand consistency for the show. Another thing is have a great distribution channel. I believe in having your podcast live somewhere. It actually lives in more than one place. The distribution channel for my podcast is Podbean. Podbean is where I upload my show, the audio format only. I upload the show and it distributes it out to the various podcast platforms. It also is the landing page where the show lives. Outside of Podbean, which is a paid subscription, which is roughly like $14 a month, it's not terrible. But outside of that, I also have page on my website in which Coffee with Yvonne lives as well, so people could see the archive footage or older episodes. So there's always a backup system. That's just the way I operate. I operate on backups. I believe in it. But Podbean, I've been using it since the beginning. Podbean has been really great. It makes it easy for me to upload on the go and also to make quick edits, because sometimes I've found, when you're uploading a file, sometimes things to get corrupted or something like that, and you hear something or a guest asks you to take something out that they heard when the episode goes live, because that does happen. Sometimes guests realize they said something that they shouldn't have said. So I will pull the episode and re-upload it. And podcast makes sure to keep that integrity of like your statistics with how your show is performing, and it doesn't mess up your metrics. What I also enjoy about podcasts are my analytics, or those metrics I was mentioning. I'm able to see where the show is being broadcasted in terms of what countries, right? Coffee with Yvonne is heard in over 26 countries around the world. I also have things that I notice about how well a a audience loves a certain episode. There was one episode that went viral that I had no idea. I still don't have any idea what platform it went viral on, but it's fine. But that episode ended up going viral and ended up ticking up a lot of traffic to my page, in which people came in from that one episode but stayed to listen to other episodes. So I'm able to see what episodes are performing well and what type of content was performing well at the time too, so I can make notes for later to do that content again. Another thing I use too are editing platforms. I use different type of editors. I really have leaned into old school ones like InShot. InShot is the OG CapCut. CapCut is great, but I prefer InShot. And that's just me. I've been using InShot forever. I have used it. I have the full service subscription one where you just buy it once and you own the actual software. So InShot allows me to edit my mobile videos and keep that consistency. I used to edit the actual podcast itself, the video podcast itself, but I've since moved over to the platform, which I'll mention in the next one, to edit the show to make it more seamless. So the platform I use to do my editing for the visual piece of the show is Riverside. Riverside is the platform I use to record, I use to edit, and I also leverage the AI tools from Riverside to chop down the amount of time needed to edit my show. When you are a solo podcaster or on a small team, time is so important. And when it comes to the podcast itself, I don't have a lot of time to sit there and dig through every single, little detail when it comes to the show, figure out every this, that, and the other. Riverside has cut that down for me tremendously because it pulls up a transcript of your show. So I'm able to look on that transcript and easily cut things out. And it makes it more like a seamless transition instead of looking choppy when it comes to editing. They also do things like recommend video content that'd be great for social media, like pulling in those key moments like, hey, this is a great moment. You should really think about making this your clip for social media and allowing for you to edit it. Once you have that in place, Riverside then says, hey, do you want me to give you a description that you can use for the show? I'm like, okay, great. And not only that, it also gives you an opportunity to add chapters in there, so you're not having to go back and re-listen to the show to figure out where those key moments are. Riverside has really helped me cut down my editing for one video of the podcast from 4 hours. I've gotten it down roughly to 2. So I've essentially cut my time in half. And because of that, I'm able to not only edit the video piece, but also able to, once I finish editing the video piece, save it as an audio file as well. So now I have the video and audio file done. And I also have the social media clips based on AI recommendations and score for performance done as well that I have saved to edit later in the week when I have the editing days for the social and mobile videos. So Riverside has really been a great tool. There are other tools out there as well that do a lot of what Riverside does, but I have found in the trial and error of recording the show that they have been the most consistent. They've been the most consistent. They've also been very affordable and the most valuable tool that I've seen so far for me as a podcaster. Another thing I use too to close out those tools before we go into the marketing takeaways, I do use ChatGPT and Coco, aka Copilot. I use them. I do. And how I use them is not just saying that, I allow it to do all the work. I allow it to serve as kind of like my assistant editor, right? Or assistant producer. I'll put together the run of show and then I'll throw it into ChatGPT or Copilot and I'll say, hey, how does this run of show sound? What is missing to make this a robust conversation? It'll give me notes of how to improve the conversations I have during my interviews. It'll also give me suggestions for titles for the episodes for how to optimize things like AI to make it more catchy and visually engaging for people who are having it come across their feed or their timeline when they're looking for something to listen or watch across platforms. It's a great way for me to stay organized because ChatGPT and Copilot will also say, hey, the flow of this does not work that well. Maybe you should shift this to here, or have you considered changing this segment to this title? For example, when I used to do my quick fire questions, I just called it quick fire, right? And ChatGPT was like, why don't you call it sip and spill? I said, girl, you have something there. I never thought of that. because ChatGPT was looking at all the information out there about Coffee with Yvonne based on the run of show and based on the history of the show, and suggested that title because it matched so well with the context and format for what the show is about. So for that marketing takeaway, smart workflows help to amplify reach without extra creative energy. And like I mentioned before, being a solo or indie podcaster, it's great if you want to put the blood, sweat, and tears into it, but after a while, it becomes exhausting. It's so important to make sure you're leaning into systems and tools that allow for your creativity to thrive and not to thrive only on burnout. So for that third lesson, perfection is not the goal. And I had to learn this myself. I did have to learn this myself. As someone who struggles with being a bit of a perfectionist, I am a type A who lives in a type B girly kind of world. I'm type A when I need to be on projects. I'm type B when I know how to step back and allow for others to lead on projects or certain things. But it's very hard for me because I am a little critical. Full transparency, it took me quite a while to feel comfortable being on camera. At first, I did not feel comfortable being on camera at all. I hated being on camera. I was so self-critical of every little thing about myself, how I moved, how I talk, what I look like, all that other things that you wouldn't think would be something that would make me feel a bit insecure. But when you're on camera, especially in this format, and you see your head on your mama's television, you're like, dear God, do I do that all the time? Is that what my voice sounds like? Is that my voice? These are things that go through your head. It took a lot of me feeling comfortable on camera to fully show up as my full self. Before, I was trying to show up what I thought was the ideal kind of interviewer, right? More like that professional, the Robin Roberts type, journalist essentially. While I studied these people, like I said before, people like Wendy Williams inspired me. People like Dorit inspired me. Oprah inspired me. These are people who show up as themselves. And it takes a while to really break that barrier down to feel comfortable being your full creative self and showing up that way on camera so it could be authentic. When it comes to me recording this podcast, even right now, stripping away the idea of perfection, I'm not in a fancy studio. I'm in my closet. I have been recording this podcast, not the first iteration of the podcast, because the first iteration of the podcast was recorded in my studio apartment. Shout out to my first apartment, in a cute little backdrop with pictures and everything. It was cute. But I have been recording this podcast in my closet since then. And it's really something because people are like, you recording in your closet? So you've been doing that in your closet the whole time? Yes. And I do it because for me, I didn't want the podcast to become something that was just, me spending money on, and I'm just pouring money into it. And, it becomes more of a financial burden. For those who choose to invest in things like producers and studios, that's great. But for me, I chose to go a different direction. To save money, I record in my closet. My closet is not a small closet, by the way. It is the size of a small bedroom. Yeah, it's the size of a small bedroom. So I do have space to do things like that in here. But I chose to do that, one, for the sound, two, for the convenience, and three, it just makes it so that I don't feel like I have to do the extra step of having to go somewhere every single week to a studio. Because I used to do that on the show I was on before. And after a while, I was like, I don't want to go in the studio. I want to be at home. I want to be at home. I want to be able to just turn these lights off and be done with it. Also, too, what I've learned over time by recording in my closet, I have to have the right tools for my setup. What I'm using right now, no lie to you, I'm using a standing desk that I bought off of Amazon. I use for work when I don't want to sit at my desk in my workspace. I have a mic. I've improved my mic over the years after receiving feedback about sound and audio, and I have plug-in USB studio lights. I set up everything myself. The moment this podcast is done, I unplug everything, I put it back in its drawer section, and I'm done. And that's it. And that's my entire setup. There's nothing fancy. But what this has taught me too, in terms of not striving for perfection, when I lean into the fact that it doesn't have to be perfect, it has to be authentic, I was able to be the best version of myself showing up on camera. Also, through trial and error over the years, for those who are indie podcasters, it's okay if the lighting isn't perfect at first. It's okay if your mic sounds a little scratchy or if you're recording on your phone. Just show up. show up as you. Show up with something to say. Show up with something to say that is meaningful. Because there's so many podcasts out there right now. The space, some may say, is oversaturated. But if you show up with a voice that is authentic, that needs to be heard, and you're adding something to the space, your podcast will find its audience. It doesn't have to be a bajillion downloads each and every week. It could be 20. It could be 30. It could be 100 downloads each week. But does that audience show up for you because they like you? That's important. Build something real and give yourself time to grow. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be authentic. It's important to think about what things you want to do with your podcast. Do you want to be a video podcast? It's okay if you don't. It's okay if it's audio only. It's okay if it's both. Another thing, do you want to be a weekly podcast? A bi-weekly podcast? Decide on what you want to be. Because even though perfection is not the goal, consistency is the goal. Be consistent. Don't be perfect, be consistent. Show up the way you want to show up, and show up each and every time ready to go and ready to give something to the conversation. In that final part with our marketing takeaway, it's okay to keep the format simple, like I mentioned before, and set up while you grow. It could be a standing desk. It could be an office. It could be your closet that you record your podcast in, and you set up a mic and give an engaging conversation. Just make sure you give your audience something to look forward to each and every time you hit record. Conversations are a marketing strategy. Choose your guests intentionally. Now, choosing guests is more than just inviting your friends for a good kiki. I know this myself because in the beginning, I invited people that I knew to be on my podcast because I thought, oh, hey, they work in this field. They'd be great for the show. Some people are great at what they do, but may not want to be on a mic talking about it or on camera. How you think about your guests is also part of the strategy. Will this guest be someone, when you have them on the show, will they co-promote your show on social media? Will they give an engaging conversation? Are they someone who may not be a talker the way you're a talker? Are you going to have to use your interview skills and guide the conversation out of them to get the best interview possible? Also, another thing too, learn how to shut up. Learn how to shut up during an interview. One thing I don't like about some way people do podcasts, and I'm choosing my words very carefully, they over talk their guests in terms of not letting the guests finish their complete thought in the conversation. I have learned very early on in my podcasting career that mute button is very important, because you may have a thought, but if your guest is not finished with their thought, you may be interrupting something that could have been profound that they were sharing with you on the show, right? And over time, I've learned how to keep that mute button off, but also keep my thoughts to myself and think and listen at the same time. Because it might be saying something that wasn't included in your original question that could have been very insightful. Now you have something to follow up their answer with to keep the conversation going, and make sure that you are someone, when you're interviewing people, do your research. Is this someone I really want to have on my show? Just because they're your friend or they may have reached out to you, be on your podcast or your platform, doesn't mean they need to be on your show. You could be very particular about who is invited, in my case, to have coffee with you. You don't have to have just anybody, or just because they have a bajillion followers of social media, their vibe may not match your vibe. Their mission may not match your mission. Make sure the people who are here for intention, and also here because they really support you, not just for their own personal gain, because it does work as a two-way street. You can't be out there just promoting your show and then they have crickets and they don't say anything. What was the point of them being on the show in the first place if they're not going to support the platform that they were just invited to be on? It doesn't make sense, right? Another thing, too, is when it comes to reaching out, come correct. Remember at the top of the episode, I mentioned about having those draft messages. Included in that draft message, like I mentioned before, is that outreach. I not only outreach via email, I also have a draft message for social media outreach as well. I will reach out to someone and slide into their DMs and, ask respectfully if they would like to be on my show, as well as including a link to the show as well, so they can hear what kind of content that I'm doing. I also set up the conversation to make sure my podcast is a safe space. The first thing I say to my guests usually is, this is a safe space for you to show up as your full self. I don't do gotcha style interviews. I'm not going to embarrass you on my platform or anything like that. Show up as your full creative self. If you have to cuss, go ahead and cuss. It's fine. If you want to cut something out because you did not feel comfortable with that answer, that is okay as well. We'll cut it out. It's not my job here to embarrass you. It's not my job here to use a clip of something you said to create buzz and traction on social media and start arguments in the comments for my own personal gain. I operate with integrity. Figure out how you want to operate and how you want to handle your interviews, and the rest will fall into place. So for that marketing takeaway, choose your guest strategically. The right guest can place your show in front of the right audience. And another thing too is, even when it comes to your guests, think outside the box. Think outside the box and sometimes take a risk and go, you know what? You're not who I would typically interview, but I like your vibe. I like what you bring to the table. So let's have a great conversation and let's chat. So for that final lesson, engagement doesn't always look like likes or comments. Please do not get caught up in the numbers. At first, when I first launched this podcast, y'all, I cried. I was like, nobody gonna listen to my show. Nobody's gonna care. No one's gonna want to hear what I have to say. No one even knows who I am. I don't have a bajillion followers on social media. I only have 800. Who cares? Who cares? The little podcast that could is now at checks notes, a little over 30,000 downloads worldwide. My little podcast that could has been, reposted by the different companies who I have talked about my podcast, talk about their product or their brand on my podcast. They reposted my social media, Instagram reels or TikTok reels. My little podcast that could, the PR teams in which I cover the stories that their clients are featured in have reached out to me to thank me for covering their client on my little podcast that could. They also have shared my little podcast that could with their company. My little podcast that could is getting so many inquiries now. I have to be very discerning about who I have on my show. I've had people who are, without telling people's business, who are CEOs, who are founders of skincare brands, who are in the music industry, who are people who have started tech companies, all kinds of people who have reached out asking to be on my show. The little podcast that could. My little podcast, I started out in my studio apartment with just an iPhone and some plug-in headphones and the little light that you put attached to your camera and some backlight from my kitchen, my little kitchenette area. That little podcast that could has grown organically over the years because I did the work, because I showed up, because I wasn't so focused dead into the numbers that I gave up. And when I showed up, like I mentioned before at the top of the episode, consistently, when I chose to engage with my audience, when I chose to be thoughtful about the content I put out promoting my show, and not just promoting my show once, but multiple times in multiple places, I made sure to show up and engage. And in that term, the engagement did come. I've had people who see me at work events, whether it's related to marketing, creativity, or whatever, or coworkers who say that they love my show. They don't have to follow me on social media. They're talking to me in real time. They tell me they love my show. They tell me they love what I bring to the table. They tell me they love my format, how I educate them about marketing creativity in a way that is attainable to a broader audience, that I strip away the mystery behind working in marketing. I strip away the things that make them feel intimidated about this field of things that they don't know. I bring a relatability to this space that they're not getting from other podcasts or thought leaders who make it seem like it's unattainable or something that you can't understand. I also recognize too, in terms of the space of being a Black woman in this field, there's not a lot of us who are talking about marketing creativity on these podcast platforms. You could Google right now, marketing and creative podcast. I guarantee you who's going to show up first. I know the work that I'm doing is more than just numbers. So when you're thinking about your podcast and the things that you're creating for your audience, think about the overall impact. Think about how you're going to be driving and creating change. It's not just about those numbers. It's about the engagement. It's about telling stories that are not heard by a broader audience. It's about giving people a platform who deserve it. There are people who I follow on TikTok that I reached out to them and said, I want you to be on my show because I see see your content. I see the work you're putting out, and I feel like you deserve a larger platform. Plus, I tell them, use my show, the interview that you were on, use that as a way of putting that into your portfolio to give you more opportunities. My show is a platform that will allow for people to springboard even higher. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to connect the people with people who deserve to be amplified. And what I love too is focus in on the why. And when you focus in on the why, the rest falls into place. I have friends who are podcasters. I support their show. I make sure I'm listening. I may be, batch listening to their stuff because we're all creatives. We all have things going on. But I genuinely support my creative friends. I generally give them real feedback when I see them in person because I know how much work it takes to put yourself out there each and every single freaking week. It is a lot. So in that final marketing takeaway, focus on building community and impact, not just going viral, because you may not be going viral in the numbers, but you'll be going viral in the impact that you leave behind for your community. Okay, I hope you enjoyed today's chat. Don't forget to follow Coffee with Yvonne on Instagram and Threads at Coffee with Yvonne. Also, if you want to see my personal account on social media, where I be cutting up, I do be cutting up though. There's a TikTok I just did because I just went to go see Wicked for good. I love me some Alpha, but I should have wore green to the theater. But anyway, I was cutting up on that one because I was getting into little Miss Nessa Rose. She, them ugly shoes. Anyway, for my personal account, you can find me on TikTok, aka the Clock app, and Instagram at Yvonne_creative marketer. To learn more about me and my business that I own, Pink Dollhouse Marketing, go ahead and go to pinkdollhousemarketing.com for my website, or you can find me on Instagram at pinkdollhousemarketing. You can slide into my DMs. That's cool. And creatives, I know I say this every week. Keep showing up, keep creating, and that your voice matters. I cannot wait to chat with you soon on another episode of Coffee with Yvonne. Have a great Thanksgiving, and don't let your family drive you crazy, okay? If you need to step outside for a walk, go ahead and step outside for a walk. It's okay. It's okay to get your plate with the aluminum foil and quietly leave. Okay, bye! Coffee with Yvonne is produced and edited by Yvonne Pearson. Coffee with Yvonne is created by Pink Dollhouse Marketing. You can catch the latest episodes by subscribing to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.